Niara Sudarkasa, Bahamian anthropologist. Niara Sudarkasa is a renowned anthropologist who has devoted much of her career to comparative studies of traditions among Africans and descendants of Africans in the New World. In 1987, she became the first female president of Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, one of the nation's oldest black institutions of higher learning. Niara Sudarkasa was born Gloria Marshall in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on August 14, 1938. Her grandparents, who raised her, came from the Bahamas, and she grew up thinking of herself as a West Indian rather than an American. Extremely precocious, she enrolled at Fisk University in 1953, when she was just 15 years old. 3 years later, in 1956, she switched to Oberlin College, and in 1957, still only 19, she earned her bachelor's degree in sociology. Many years later, Sudarkasa told Ebony magazine, which was interviewing a number of luminaries about the turning point in their lives, that her experience at these two schools was pivotal. Quote, "I didn't even know what anthropology was before I went to Fisk," she said, "and had never studied it very much at all until I went to Oberlin." Unquote. Her time at Fisk, she said, contributed much to her later career as president of Lincoln University because it gave her a first-hand awareness of the value of attending a predominantly black college. Other pivotal experiences were to follow. At Oberlin, she had discovered a link between customs among the Yoruba people of Africa and savings and lending practices employed by her Caribbean relatives. This inspired in her a fascination with comparative studies that would eventually take her to Africa. But before that could happen, she earned her doctorate at Columbia University in New York City in 1964. A teaching position at New York University followed. Then, in 1967, she became a member of the University of Michigan faculty. During the 1970s, Sudarkasa, who up to that time still went by the name Gloria Marshall, visited Africa. Her experience there was another turning point, and she found herself captivated by the similarities between the customs of the Yoruba and those of the Afro-Caribbean community in which she had grown up. Africa offered to her a sense of ethnic rootedness, of cultural identity, and she resolved to take an African name. It was then that she became Niara, which means woman of high purposes in Swahili, Sudarkasa. Sudarkasa became the first black woman to receive tenure, that is, a contract guaranteeing a long-term commitment of employment from the University of Michigan. In the late 1970s, she was appointed Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs. Then, in 1987, Lincoln University in Pennsylvania selected her as its 11th president. Lincoln, one of the oldest African American institutions of higher learning, had an extremely distinguished record, counting among its graduates a head of state, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, a Supreme Court Justice, Thurgood Marshall, and a renowned poet, Langston Hughes. For much of its history, Lincoln had been a males-only school, which made Sudarkasa's selection as president a particular distinction. Sudarkasa has proven a popular administrator with students who have nicknamed her Madam President. In 1991, she established her independence from the African American mainstream when she supported the nomination of Clarence Thomas, a controversial figure because of his conservative views, to take a seat on the Supreme Court. As for her role at Lincoln, Sudarkasa has worked to make it an outstanding institution, not merely in comparison to other predominantly black schools, but to the top liberal arts institution in the country. Quote, "Unless a sense of service and duty is instilled," she once told Essence magazine, "our upward mobility as African Americans will only be measured by cars and styling." Among the professional groups to which Sudarkasa belongs are the African Studies Association, the American Anthropology Association, of which she is a fellow, the Association of Black Anthropologists, and the American Association for Higher Education. A member of the Council on Foreign Relations, as well as 20 state and national boards. In the late 1990s, she was one of 5 Americans appointed by President Bill Clinton to represent the United States on the 15-member Trilateral Task Force on Educational Collaboration that included representatives from Mexico and Canada. Sudarkasa's awards include a Ford Foundation Scholarship for Early College Admission from 1953 to 1957, a John Hay Whitney Opportunities Fellowship from 1959 to 1960, a Ford Foundation Foreign Area Training Fellowship from 1960 to 1963, a Carnegie Foundation Study of New Nation Fellowship from 1963 to 1964, a Social Science Research Council Fellowship from 1973 to 1974, a Senior Fulbright Research Scholarship from 1982 to 1983, 12 honorary degrees and awards from Alpha Kappa Alpha, Zeta Phi Beta, the Elks Club, Lynx, and the city of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. She has published numerous books and articles. Sudarkasa is married to John L. Clark, an inventor, sculptor, and contractor. Their son Michael has followed somewhat in his mother's career path, at least as regards her interest in African affairs. After earning a law degree from Harvard University, he took an internship with the African Development Bank of the Ivory Coast. Citations are in the description.